I will definitely kind of look at a space and then pull everything out and then kind of redesign it again, because over time you set something here, you collect it, it can start looking cluttered. And then the story that you're trying to tell or the interesting pieces that you're trying to kind of profile, they are hidden. So that's my approach.
Welcome to Decorate Like a Design Boss, a podcast for design lovers who want to create beautiful spaces in their very own homes. My name is Kimberly Grigg, and I'm a professional interior designer who teaches design lovers like yourselves how to decorate. And when I say decorate, I mean decorate like a design boss. If you're ready to create a space that your family loves and your neighbors can't stop raving about, well, buckle up, honey, because it's time to design. Well, hello there, Andrea, and welcome to the podcast. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here today.
Wonderful. So I want to set this up a little bit because one day I was scrolling on Instagram, and as I often do, too often, and I came across this amazing striped sofa that I think has become somewhat famous. And it was on your feed, and I didn't reach out. I liked it. And then the next time I saw it, I'm like, I got to know about this whole thing here. So tell me about that sofa. It's kind of like I'm having a love affair with it.
Sure. So actually the sofa, like most of my design is something that I have sourced or found at local consignment stores or antique stores. So that sofa has a very interesting story, as most of my pieces do. It, aside from being really cool and amazing with the stripes, etc., I was the fourth owner. So the consignment store that had it, I saw it and I immediately loved it. I reached out to them. They said it was sold. And I think for the fourth owner, people had purchased it, brought it home, and it was too bright and vibrant for them. And so I like to say I'm lucky number 4. And it also kind of underpins a little bit of what I kind of encourage my followers to do, which is persistence, right? If there's something you see, make people aware that you're interested in it and then be persistent about it. So I am the happy recipient of this amazing piece. It is a covered piece. So underneath is an antique kind of furniture piece, and that is a covered fabric. But again, what's so cool about it is it's an antique piece, it's a sustainable approach, and the bones are good. And when you put amazing fabric on those old pieces, they have a second life. So everything about the sofa is kind of a homage to my brand. Vibrant, whimsy, irreverent colors on sustainable design approaches with amazing, good quality antique bones. So that's kind of Lost Orchid in a nutshell.
Wow. And I love that philosophy. And it's ever so important today because the supply chain is all clogged and we can't get things. So I think it's making all of us nod a lot more to going a little backwards, finding these pieces, and then trying to figure out how to repurpose them. I know I'm doing a ton of this. This is actually how I started my design career. And then in the middle, I got all caught up with furniture lines and ordering this and ordering that. And when you have to keep minimums going for furniture lines, then you order a lot of those products. But now I can't get them. So I'm kind of taking a side step, or actually maybe a backward step, which feels very forward all at the same time. And so when I was kind of reading through all of your information, I believe you were in corporate America for a while. So how did you get into all of this, and what was corporate America, and how did that transfer to this cool design aesthetic that you have?
Yeah. So I have probably a very unorthodox background. I was in corporate America for 20 years. I was in change, transformation, and strategy. And I spent a big stint of my time too in human resources. So that is about as opposite as you could get, in my opinion, from interior design. However, I would say on the surface, everything that I learned in change management and transformation, I'm just doing it now on a micro scale. I'm doing it one-to-one change, because most people, when they finally get to the point where they're interested in reaching out to an interior designer, it's where they're asking you for help. There's probably a significant change in their lives. They either purchased a home, or they perhaps, in all of the stuff that was happening with the pandemic, people were moving back into the homes, new family members were joining them, parents, or they have parents that passed away and now they're trying to kind of reconcile their estates. So all of that is change, but it's just in a very different size change. So I'm able to kind of use those skills that I have in corporate America in the interior design. And then of course you have to have a passion and love and general like curiosity for all things design. So it does require that love and that passion of design. And then I take that and add it to kind of my background, project management. I did all of those things on a very large corporate scale for a large pharma, consumer, and medical device company. So my last book of business was 9.2 billion. Now I'm dealing with much smaller kind of budgets, but at the same time, change for people is so personal. It doesn't matter what the size of the budget, the amount of change is still very significant to my clients. And so what I love about this is I've always loved working with people. I've always loved story. So the story of someone's lives being pulled through. And I get to kind of apply that. There's nothing more vulnerable than someone inviting you into their lives to help them kind of build something and visualize something that they're going to ultimately live into. So to me, I find great pride and I'm very humbled by it. And when people do reach out to, work with me, it's a very collaborative process. All of that's very corporate, right? I worked in a matrix environment for years. Now I work very collaboratively with my clients. So so it was actually, Lost Orchid was a dream that I had when I was little. And what I do tell people is never lose those dreams, because you don't know when they're going to pop back up again in your life. And so when I was 8 years old, I remember my parents and I went on a trip, and it was like the first time I really remember seeing orchids, and I thought they were gorgeous, and I had always loved designing. And I came back and kind of proclaimed to my parents, I want to design a restaurant, but I don't care about the food. I need to design. I said, I just want to decorate. And I want to call it Lost Orchid. So fast forward, I didn't go to art school or design school. My background is in business school, and had been kind of living this career. And in 2020, a lot of personal changes happened for me as well. My role was impacted. We had just moved to the Northeast from the Midwest, probably 18 months, 2 years prior. We had been hit by a tornado. There was a lot of things happening personally and professionally. And I kind of got pulled back to that, like, what do I want to do and what brings me joy? And then you had the backdrop of the pandemic and things that were happening. Race riots were happening in Philadelphia and across the US. And it was like, where can I not only find joy, but where can I help people find joy? And for me, it was revisiting that dream I had when I was younger. That's where the name comes from, Lost Orchid. And also at the time, I think I was also kind of searching out what I was going to do as a second career. And so it was very appropriately kind of branded, in addition to the fact that personally, I love like that Hollywood Regency look, which is, that orchids signify. But orchid also is very resilient. So I felt like it was a time in my life where I was kind of looking to kind of pull from my resiliency. So all of that to say, in 2020, I founded Lost Orchid Interiors, and it has been a wild ride ever since. And it's been fun. And I think I've applied a lot of what I've learned in taking risks in corporate America. You have to take risk with color. You have to take risk and help people to come along and try new things. And they therefore have this this great story they can tell with their homes if they're willing to step out of what they see in catalogs and really think about, what do I love and what is my stamp?
Sure. It's so inspiring that you were brave enough to do this. And it's so, I'm trying, my mind is boggled that you did this, and it's so well thought, like that vision at 8 years old, the symbolism of the orchid, and it is so evident in what you're creating that I see on Instagram. It's very intriguing, I think. So tell me, I know Lost Orchid is physically located in Philadelphia. So you're open to the public. Tell me more about like the services and that you offer and what Lost Orchid, truly is and what all it embodies.
Sure. So I would say it's multiple channels, right? I definitely have a direct to consumer approach, business approach for all of my channels. But one of the things that I do is obviously interiors, where I'm focused primarily on residential. I have done a commercial project that was more nonprofit with a coffee house, but most of my clients are residential. So I do interiors. And then also another channel that I have is kind of resale. So I'm all about trying to create access for people to create unique experiences in their home. And so I love antiques. I love vintage pieces. Things are not manufactured like they once were. And so I source and curate those pieces and then host live sales as well.
Mm.
And so I would say that that's kind of a little bit about what Lost Orchid is. I do local, so definitely in person consultations, but I also do virtual. I
Mhm.
have clients in not just Mississippi and Miami, Florida, because I'm able to kind of virtually consult as well. And because we are such a kind of global society, we're able to also source things nationally and be able to still provide support for virtual clients. So I would say it's kind of those three tiers as far as kind of my business approach.
So when you source, are you sourcing in probably a bunch of different ways? Like you probably, it's kind of everywhere, but like, do you go abroad and bring things back, or how
Sure.
is that? How do you accomplish that?
Yeah, so it's really it's the ABCs, right? Always be collecting. So always be collecting. So I'm always looking locally. And when we travel, I'll do kind of trips to curate and different pockets of the country or the world really have obviously different kind of pieces, right? You get these amazing kind of Palm Beach looking pieces in, of course, like the Floridian area. However, you also get really similar kind of pieces in the Jersey and New York area. And the reason being is because people have second homes, maybe they've transferred
Mhm.
goods back and forth. You also have high population density. So there's more people in these kind of metropolitan areas. So it vastly varies, but yes, I do go on trips. I'm always curating. I'm looking in antique stores, thrift stores, consignment stores. I'm shopping people's homes when I go to their home, right? Because there's probably a lot of pieces that have just sat in the corner and they've looked at and not seen how significant they could be if, for example, we were upholstered or refinished. So yeah, so and also it's creating a network. I think it's really important that people create networks to, there's people that are in the estate business that I'm really good friends with that also kind of come along and partner as well. So I would say it's probably all the above. I'm always looking, I'm always sourcing, always curating pieces.
It's fascinating, and it must be endless. Like you seems like you're curating in your sleep, probably.
I am.
Right?
Like a warehouse at this point.
Right, right.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So you mentioned your design aesthetic has a Hollywood Regency vibe, which is very obvious. You also refer to yourself as a maximalist. So what is a maximalist?
Sure. So for me, a maximalist is layers. There's always kind of a layered approach to maximalism. I love multiple patterns. I don't like matchiness. I like things I can't remember who was the famous designer that said this, but I use it frequently, which is you almost want things to slightly clash yet coordinate.
Mm.
So for me, it is a little bit of kind of pushing like color boundaries and pushing textures and patterns. And maximalism is also, in my opinion, eclectic
Mhm.
because you're probably a collector of something, whether that's gallery walls, prints, whether that's actual collections of something or other pieces. For me, that's what maximalism is. It's like, how can you really turn up the volume of the aesthetic in a space and have it very layered and have an interesting story in it. So when people walk into my home, I want them to ask about some of the oddities that I have in the home so that it's a great way to kind of reveal parts of your story if people are asking questions when they come in.
Very soulful. And
I like that word. Yeah.
yeah, but I'm curious because I'm definitely a maximalist in my own home. I have to run the gamut in terms of design, and I'm more of a
Right.
designer for people's personalities, and not everyone is a maximalist, that's for
Right.
sure. But, as a maximalist, how do you keep it from feeling and looking cluttered?
hmm Well, I think that's always one of the tensions that maximalists like sit in, right? But
Sure.
for me, I do really try to, I will definitely kind of look at a space and then pull everything out and then kind of redesign it again because over time you set something here, you collect it can start looking cluttered, and then the story that you're trying to tell or the interesting pieces that you're trying to kind of profile, they are hidden. So
Sure.
that's my approach, is just kind of taking it that way when I'm trying to design. The other thing that I do, because I do live sales, is I do believe in kind of catch and release. So when you love something and it's been in your home for a while and you've enjoyed it, and then you find yourself kind of deprioritizing it, well, then, someone else might be interested in that piece. And so that's where I do the live sales and kind of then replenish the pool, if you will, on antiques and vintage pieces where other people can purchase and then they can put them in their home. So
Oh, I
it's a
love that.
it's a little bit of kind of this ecosystem in the maximalist world, and I'm sure you probably do it as well, where you love pieces, they've been with you for a while. Your really special ones you never get rid of, but there are probably some that are more ancillary that you can kind of, release back into the vintage ecosystem for others to
Yes.
love.
I love to rotate too. I
Yeah.
just love to freshen things up. Sometimes I'll spend the weekend just redoing my bookshelves or
Yes.
redoing
Yeah.
some vignettes in my house and that kind of thing. But I don't know if you have this, but I have this, and it is a very curious thing. I'm a bit of a chameleon, and I feel like as a designer, it serves me well because I can turn into whatever style I'm working in and do a good job with it. I study it, I get into it, and I'm going like whatever it is. And I have some friends who have very minimalistic homes and that kind of thing. And I'll go in and I turn into a chameleon. And then I go home to my own home, which I love.
Yep.
And I take everything off and I'm going to be a minimalist all of a sudden. And that lasts for about 2 days. And then I can't stand it and I put it all back. So, how do you deal, or do you design for a minimalist, or do you stay strictly in your lane? And how do you can you convert a minimalist to a maximalist, or why bother?
Yeah, no, and that's a great question. So I'm like you. I actually have clients that run the gamut, and I don't like just designing for people like me. Although that's really what you see on my Instagram. And you'll see the difference, right? Because I'll post client photos from projects that are more minimalistic, and they don't get the likes because my followers are maximalist, and that's okay.
Right.
But for me, it's not about what I love, it's about what my clients love. And that helps sharpen and challenge my own skills, where I don't want to just be designing over and over again florals just because I love florals and using them in fabrics. I love how that kind of pushes me. And then there are so many great designers that I follow and that I, watch and learn from that are in other spaces as me, because I want to surround myself with people that aren't like me so that I can be exposed and curious to other things. And then my own design style evolves. But like
Mm.
you, I very much I love chinoiserie and the bright colors. And you can see behind me kind of that maximalist kind of Palm Beach feel. But then I also have rooms in my home it's almost like a palette cleanser. So my
Mhm.
living room is a palette cleanser. It has no color. It is very kind of contemporary modern, and it helps me to kind of, that's where I stay with my family. And so for me, I have children, and so their stuff can get overwhelming in a maximalist home. So having a room that we gather that is minimalist helps my brain feel organized, if that makes sense. Like to be able
It
to
makes
categorize.
such sense to me,
Yeah.
especially when you work in color every day.
Mhm.
Like one time I went through this phase, I wanted everything in my house to be white, and I'm
Mhm.
known for color. Color is my gig. And I really felt like I was living in someone else's home. I
Mhm.
did enjoy that I would work in color all day and I'd come home and I would be in white. I enjoyed that, but
Mhm.
it ended up not being enough for me. And I had to reinsert it in big doses and in big ways.
Yeah.
And and I think design is so artistic.
Yeah.
And and because I am an artist, a painting artist, it's vulnerable. And
Mhm.
it's intimate and it's vulnerable. And when you put it out there, it can be judged. And I think that we as designers, because I think most designers are always pushing the edge in some way, like whatever it is, you're always, whether it's I'm going to insert more color into my work or whether I'm going to take color out or whatever it is, it's easy to feel like an artist because again you're vulnerable and all eyes are on and you're known for an aesthetic and it's just interesting to me to see how things run the gamut.
Yeah, especially in social media where
Especially.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So since you brought up this wall behind you, I got to go there because
Sure.
so my listener can't see this, but I'm just going to sort of briefly describe what I'm looking at, which is absolutely beautiful. So first of all, this gorgeous pinky salmon color, and then it's a really interesting gallery wall with a great lamp that is a chinoiserie lamp with a deeper tone of that pinky peach salmony color shade. And then all of these really exciting prints that it's great. And I love the birds. There's birds on brackets and the brackets, of course, no detail unturned. There she has these really fun little deeper salmon colored tassels. And I don't know, I could just lick it. It's so cool.
Thank you.
So tell me about how this happened and the color of that wall. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I this is my office. So to me, I wanted it to be as kind of reflective of me as possible and kind of creative. So everything you see here kind of represents me in some way. So what you can't see is my lamp. It's a pineapple lamp. But again, it's vintage. It's like that classic vintage, kind of iron metal pineapple. I also love tassels. I love the details of just very feminine in some ways, right? And just like beautiful pieces. So the peacocks that you're seeing, those are vintage peacocks, if you can actually see those. Yep. And they were gifts to me from my mom. So that's very special to me. We've got some Mexican feather art down here. Again, that's, kind of mid-century art. And then you've also got this very kind of modern, eclectic kind of color piece that to me, I like to tie in a little bit of modern because otherwise I don't want it to feel and some people call my aesthetic grand millennial, whether you agree or not, but I don't ever want it to feel like it's getting too country or too like dated.
Yeah. So and can be sometimes, and because I'm a maximalist and I work in grand millennial style, I always worry, am I getting old lady-ish? Right, and then by inserting that little piece of spark, that little piece of abstract just absolutely makes the whole thing sing.
Right. It kind of is that curious piece, right? And then over here we have kind of a piece that was done by a missionary in Mexico. So everything kind of has a story. They're all kind of a similar color palette. So they tie, again, it's that kind of tension between coordination versus clashing, right?
Love it.
And, it's kind of all out there. And if you're someone who you can look at visualize, if you're a visual person, maximalism might be a great style for you. If you look at my style and how it's evolved from being in corporate America to today, that it's vastly different. And I think people feel like they have to be one thing their whole life. And so I hope that in stories and things that people are seeing in Instagrams that they follow, they see this evolution. Your home should be an evolution. It should be organic, just like you are. And it will change. It might always center around a couple of key things that ground you, but you'll see it change. And for me, very much kind of embracing that color side of who I am it's definitely coming through in all of my work.
Yes. Well, since you brought up color, now is a good time to segue.
Sure.
And because you use some amazing colors in your work. And I guess since I work in color, I think where people struggle is, first of all, maybe they're scared of color.
Yeah.
And secondly, they don't know quite where to use the color. So, do you have formulas or ways that you approach color that seem to work for you?
So I totally agree with you. I think people are very scared of color. I get that a lot. Like, oh, I love it for you. I could never do that. I don't know if that's kind of hangovers from realtors past saying that you'll never be able to sell this home if you paint it a certain color. I don't know.
Right.
But that is a deep fear for people. And so one way that you can kind of dip your toe in color is pillows are a great place to start. Those are fungible. You can, mix and match those pieces. Lampshades are another place where you can add color and remove it if you're not comfortable with it. But I do try to encourage people to take risk because it can always be undone. I think one of the bigger investments is certainly fabric. So for me, if I have a client that's a little scared of color, perhaps you don't want to sink a ton of money or investment into drapery, for example, because that is a long-term commitment. But I think there's some things that you can also have different lacquered pieces in your home that are less of an investment and that are versatile. So maybe if you get tired of them in a particular room, they could be then applied to another space. So I kind of, walk clients through that process a little bit. I would be curious kind of your thoughts on how you kind of also get people warmed up to the idea of color.
Well, glad you asked because it's a big subject. And right now, the world has been white for so long. It was either white or gray. And actually, neither of those are favorite choices of mine. Have I worked in them? Absolutely. Have I worked in them a lot? To ad nauseum.
Right.
but I tend to like in this phase in my life, interesting that you said this, like I used to really gravitate more towards muted tones and softer colors and now I'm more of a clean color girl instead of a muddy color girl, if I have my preference.
Mhm.
But when working with clients, I can quickly assess whether they can take color on the wall or not. And if they can't, okay, fair enough. Then I'm going to pick more of a background color that's neutral, more neutral, might have a little, something in it. But then I might give them splashes of color or help them embrace splashes of color in other pieces. I'm pretty successful when I'm working with men. They tend to like blues universally, and women typically can take greens of some sort, and those two can go together very well. So I can kind of sometimes create a palette based off of that. When I ask clients if there are colors they don't like, it's one of my questions, then I typically will get out of a man that he doesn't want to have pink. And I don't know why men look beautiful in pink. I think that that's not a great choice, but who's going to argue about it? And I find that people are either lovers of purple or don't care for purple at all. But I personally love lilacs, lavenders, and purples because I don't get to work in them that much. So
Mhm.
they've kind of become a go-to for me, especially when I mix them back to rich colors like cobalts or something like that.
Right, that inky color.
Yes, I love those combinations. And so that's sort of how I do it. Sometimes I end up with pretty neutral spaces. And at least until someone really trusts me that, I'm going to give them a look, like I might do some more color in a guest bedroom and then they're loving it. And they're like, oh, I see what you mean.
Mhm.
But, I don't really have a formula for where I start the color palette, like other than typically I'll start with a rug or a piece of art or a piece of fabric. And then I kind of branch from there. But I clearly have people that cannot do color on a wall.
Mhm.
And no matter what I say. And I just decided at this point, it's not worth even, the effort in terms of argument. I can find a color in a different way. I'm sure you feel similarly.
I do. I do. I think that's a really good point. And I think too, I will start a lot of times. I like to see what people's artwork is in the home
Mhm, mhm.
because I'm very fortunate because my business was started on a social media platform and it does afford me the chance to share who I am personally as well as professionally, that I draw some of those clients that are very, very much want to step out of the box versus
Right.
more standard clients that are just looking for like an interior designer. They know a little bit about how much risk I will take. So I've had multiple clients where you'll see it's this eclectic, very Victorian, almost moody colors, and I will start with their artwork. one client who I adore. She loves original artwork. It's very whimsy. It's very dark. It's got some irony to it. And so I know if that brings her joy, then that is what she's going to visually also want to see in the space. And so we
Right.
take it that way in some of her designs, where you see more of this kind of neo Victorian modern look. The other thing I think is important too is I like to see how people dress, because how they project themselves to the world is also how it's like your home's an extension of yourself.
Mhm.
So I also have clients kind of share with me some of their favorite outfits. I will literally have them send pictures, even if it's not their outfit, what do they love to see? And in that, I can also see color. So I can see
Mhm.
the themes of color that they present. There's no orange, the absence of orange. Orange is one that a lot of people don't like, or reds. People have
Mhm.
visceral reactions
Mhm.
to red.
Same. Mhm.
And so, I think that's also kind of an insight. But like, you were always consulting and always trying to pull out of people their tolerance for
Sure.
the design aesthetic.
Sure. And, to date, every designer I've talked with does use the wardrobe as a
Mhm.
key. And I think I mean, it's so indicative, because even if it's not something like, I do have clients, sometimes they'll say, I don't really like anything in my wardrobe. I just wish I could start all over. And then I'll say, well, show me outfits that you admire. And
Mhm.
then we've got something, we're
Right,
going,
right.
we're
Exactly.
rolling. And I love your tip and idea about looking at the artwork, because or even things like, if sometimes I'll say to people, what do you really love in your home? Because very few people are starting completely all over. And I'll say, what do you love in your home? And they'll show me a few things. And suddenly I'm starting to see, are they muddy colors? Are they clean colors? Are they, or do they have a vision? Do they like, what things do they feel comfortable with? And the next thing you know, you've kind of nailed them, and you didn't even know, really, you didn't even know you were doing it. You just
Yeah.
instinctive almost, I think. So
Yeah. Carl Varney actually said something that I've kind of grabbed onto as well, which is people's first memory. Have you heard this? People's first memory of a room that they loved. Like, so maybe not the first room, but like the room that they remember as young as they were, their earliest memory that they thought was beautiful, typically is someone's design style. It's that
mhm,
weird kind of imprint on your mind as to what joy looks like. And that is very much accurate for my own personal design. And I assume probably the same for clients. So I will ask them to articulate their earliest memory of a beautiful space and what is it
yes,
from that they found beautiful. And that typically hasn't changed that much now as an adult.
sure. And I think that is a really interesting way. I'm not familiar with that, but I do ask clients to describe their the space that resonates with them the most, the prettiest place they've ever been. And I kind
Mhm.
of get all over the place with that, but it stretches them, because when you think about the most beautiful place you've ever been, you have to stop and think. But if it moved you, and if a husband, wife, or a partnership agree on that, then oh man, we are off
Yeah,
to the races,
right.
right? Yay, yay, and yay. So what kinds of things that what kinds of things do you do that sort of are a signature for you? Are there things that you do that are a signature for you?
Sure. I would say one of the things that I do really try to kind of encourage people towards is I do love working in wallpaper. I think there's so many different types of wallpaper. You have wallpaper that has absolutely no pattern, it's just more texture, but there's something for everyone in that. And I feel like that's something that is very much kind of a signature of this generation, where we are, willing to kind of step into that. So for me, you'll see a lot of wallpaper for clients. And again, I caveat everything with saying, and there I have clients that don't want to touch the wallpaper.
Sure.
They don't want to do
Sure.
wallpaper. But I would say that that's definitely a signature for me. Another signature for me, first and foremost, is repurposed pieces. So it would be very rare for me to not use in any way an antiqued or vintage piece in a design. And and there's a reason, as I said before, the value proposition of the pieces, the story of the pieces. But because I also really make it a focus for me to shop the home, I want that person, it's part of change management where they can
Mhm.
see themselves in this space by putting something that has been with them for a long time in the space. So it doesn't feel like a foreign body that they're
Sure.
rejecting. It's part of them. So I'm going through my mind and cataloging in every single project that I've had, you will see those kind of vintage, consigned, thrifted, antique pieces because they just provide that beautiful story. Even in my retail clients that just want new custom pieces, we were able to pull in some of her family's Staffordshire collection and
Mhm.
do it in a very subtle way that did not date the look, but gave it just enough of patina to
Mhm.
where there was something interesting on the shelf. But that would definitely be a signature of mine.
I love that. So, a lot of I have students in addition to my clients, and I teach people that it's never going to hire. There are people that are never going to hire a designer for whatever reason,
Mhm.
but they want a beautiful home, and they're enthusiasts, and they're all about like learning and challenging themselves and obtaining information because the end goal for them is the same as the end goal for you and I, a
Mhm.
beautiful space. So, first of all, do you think that creativity and design can be learned?
Yeah, I do. I definitely think you have to start with a capability. There has to be a baseline of interest, right? But yeah, I think you can definitely learn and sharpen. I mean, look at my own career, right? Which is there was that initial kind of aspiration or interest, and then stepping into the design world and having an intellectual curiosity where you're constantly learning and pulling and building. I do think you can build that muscle, but you have to have a muscle to start with. And that is
Mhm.
that you have the interest to do so and that you have a certain level of ability. And then when you add the aspiration and the opportunity by studying and learning, I do think you can grow for sure.
So, any simple tips or ideas that people can use to either train their eye or strengthen that muscle? Simple things that not the average bear thinks about, but would love to employ
Mhm.
in their decors.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely learn from the masters. Read those coffee table books. They're not just for pretty layers, they actually have content inside of them. They have beautiful pictures, but they also have the stories of the why. And then as you start learning about kind of these, at least for me, because chinoiserie is a big part of what I love personally, I like to understand kind of the whole historical aspect of the design industry, the aesthetic of chinoiserie. Where did it come from? How do you validate, authenticate certain pieces? But all of that is through at least starting with reading and
Mhm.
researching and learning. You can also do that obviously with who are you following on Instagram. So there's a lot of people, some are amazing, some I would caution you against how there's they posted the other day, please don't put tape on your windows and make it look like it's grids. Like, even though someone's doing that, let's not try that. But follow, you have access to people for the first time in a generation. You have access to these master designers that were only for the elite before. Now they have master classes. Now we have podcasts. Now we have Instagram brands and platforms. Tap into those and learn, and then identify what do you like and kind of give yourself some space to create. So start small, learn, research, and just try. I mean, just take the risk. I don't so many people are so afraid just to try. People ask me, how did you start a business? I just did it. I really just like built a kind of question for myself around design thinking, which is my corporate background, which was, how do I monetize on a social media platform to build a business? That was my design thinking question. It wasn't how do I become the best designer or how do I have the most eclectic design firm. It really was around how do I leverage social media in order to build something. And then that kind of blossomed into really identifying, and I tested a lot of things, but for me, it's the channeling or the channel of vintage and antique resale, and it's also interiors. So that's, there's DIYers out there. There's whole other ways that people are using those platforms, but I would just say give yourself
Yes.
a challenge question and try with your designs.
And I love that you've been true to your lane, even though you can branch out of your
Mhm.
lane. Like, you know what you love, and
Right.
you know how to insert it in a way that people can understand and embrace. And that's why they come to you, because I know that often people come to me not because I'm just a designer, but because there is something that they do like about my aesthetic
Mhm.
that they want to wrap their brains around in some way. So, how would a person that isn't the normal collector, isn't the person always looking for soulful items, but are kind of warming up to this because of supply chain or because they just like the idea? How do they start this? How do they become better at finding these pieces?
Mhm. I definitely think the first thing they can do is join the sales, right? So there are a lot of different people on Instagram that do live sales. It is a way for you to start learning what are some of those pieces that you weren't even exposed to before, but that you connect with. And then from there, you kind of get the sense when you could maybe start at an estate sale, or you could go to a local consignment store where you kind of have a sense for what you're looking for. Otherwise, those places can be very overwhelming and difficult to kind of navigate. But I think by starting and following the right people, you're able to kind of, again, that whole process of learn from others and then apply that.
So, wow, I can't believe the time has flown by. And it's time for me to ask you my little signature question. And it goes something like this: if you had a hashtag that embodied your legacy, what would it be?
Find joy in design. Because
Mm.
for me, I found joy in design and now I help others find joy in design. So hashtag find joy in design.
I love it. So, Andrea, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I feel like we have so much in common. I could just continue
I
this
know.
on and on and on. And I love talking with like-minded people, and I also love that you're open to share with people how important it is to live in a beautiful space and how important it is to let that be joyful, because joy, life goes fast.
Mhm.
And joy is that one root that we can hang on to. And finding it in our home is, to me, what my mission is all about as well. Like, the reason I do all of this is because I really care that people live beautifully, and if they don't, how they can learn to live beautifully, because it is a more inspired life. It's a beautiful life, and it's more soulful. And that's kind of a new favorite word of mine, because I feel like homes with soul are really what it's all about, and you are fast forwarding that with your own mission, and I admire it and I applaud it. So tell me, where can people find you?
Mhm, sure. So you can find me on Instagram at Lost Orchid Interiors, and I am there. You can see my personal and professional side all in one space.
I love it. And I'm just telling you, the listener, you got to hop on her space. It is really incredible. I've enjoyed watching it. I've learned from you, and I've been inspired by some of the things that you're creating. And again, I can't thank you enough for spending and sharing time with us today. And I guess I want to talk to you all day, but I can't. So I'm going to say to the listener, bye for now. Thanks for listening to Decorate Like a Design Boss. If you want more info on how to decorate your space like a pro, visit KimberlyGriggDesigns.com. See you next week.